Hi, this is Dustin Hausner. I'm the Jewish Outreach and Program Director at the Wayne YMCA. All our Jewish programs is funded through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. And today I have a really wonderful guest. I'm a very big student of history, as you can see on the sides of the books on my walls. So I'm really excited today. Not only do we have someone who's been working with history for many years, but works for a wonderful organization in New Jersey. I would like to introduce you to Linda Forgosh, who is the Executive Director and Curator at the Jewish Historical Society of New Jersey. Linda, it is so wonderful to have you here with us today.
And I would like to repeat that that is my job for 22 years since October 1999. And as executive director and curator, I'm interested in history, particularly local history as it pertains to what we know as the Jewish Federation of Greater MetroWest. And of course, with me looking at Dustin, I would like to thank him and as the outreach director, as well as the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. So therefore, I might say, let's begin. I did put together a few prepared notes because even Winston Churchill, although many people felt that he spoke extemporaneously, if you read the 7 volumes, when you start with his young years, he said, people thought I spoke extemporaneously, but I assure you, he said, I never went anywhere unless I knew I was completely prepared. So, okay to Winston Churchill. In fact, I am now reading Eric Larson's The Splendid and the Vile, which is 1 year in Churchill's life. It is a great read, but I'm not plugging that. I'm plugging what it is that we do at the Historical Society. So the Jewish Historical Society, therefore to be known as the JHS, was founded in 1990, and I'm not the quickest mathematician, but even I know we should be congratulated as we are celebrating our 30th anniversary.
Absolutely.
We are an independent 501c3 not-for-profit membership organization, and our offices are located in Whippany, New Jersey, in the building that houses the Jewish Federation. Now, what sets us apart from other Jewish historical societies of similar size, we have to call apples to apples, is that just like the Library of Congress, now I'm pitching big, our archive vault is climate controlled to preserve its valuable paper documents, the oldest of which is 1751, even before we became colonies. And what was the issue? Non-payment of a bill. We do adhere, and this is always pretty important for you to know about any historical society. You don't exist without a mission statement. And that is something that we consider important, and therefore we want to let everybody know we are the official repository for the history of Jewish life in 5 counties in New Jersey, mostly northern New Jersey: Essex, Morris, Union, Sussex, and portions of Somerset counties, New Jersey. Now, what do we offer our members? Well, right off the bat, we send biannual newsletters. Up until this particular moment in COVID history, we sent them with a stamp. It came to your door. Now we are sending them as e-blasts. We are also revisiting the exhibits and speakers that we had as part of this COVID experience, and we're calling History Repeats Itself. And for that, we are using Constant Contact for every e-blast. And that's, once again, is the accommodation to the COVID. Are we happy about it? As they say in Hebrew, zemayesh, that's just how it is. Traditionally, the JHS hosts 4 public forums each year and researches and prepares what the society is best known for, its traveling exhibits, which have been seen at synagogues, public and university libraries, on Cablevision, in hospitals, in Greater MetroWest JCCs that are located, each individual building, one in Whippany, one in West Orange, one in Scotch Plains, and one in Union. But most recently, and the thing we are super proud of, is the fact that we've buttressed all our efforts to raise funds to digitize the copies of the one time before all the paper disintegrates, what was known as the Jewish News for the periods of 1947 to 2016. It has already proven itself to be an invaluable tool for researchers. And of course, my job has afforded me the opportunity to meet some amazing individuals who love the history of the community as much as I do. So I would like to quote the words of Dr. Clement Price, Newark's preeminent historian, who is also featured in a New Jersey Historical Society that's located in Park Place in Newark exhibit documenting Newark's 1967 unrest that he called What's Going On, and you might want to Google so you get familiar with a giant, a lover of Newark, although he was not born in Newark. And it is quoted, according to Dr. Price, because I heard him say it, quote unquote, if there is something the greater public wants to know about Jewish life and history in Greater MetroWest, I recommend you contact the JHS and specifically Linda Forgosh. If they do not have the information you need, you can be sure that they, meaning the society, or even me, know where to find it, because Forgosh's motto is simply this: this historical society, besides its generous hours, gives great customer service. You remember what that used to be like, right? Instead of press 1, press 2, press 3.
I do.
So for today's presentation, I thought I would go shopping in our archives and rely on various publications that are the result of what a researcher or a lover of local history might enjoy knowing about. And when I say I'm going shopping in our archives, I am literally taking a shopping bag, and it has a great story. The Jewish Historical Society, as probably the majority of historical societies in the state of New Jersey, belong to something known as New Jersey Historical Societies. Linda Barth is the president, and a very interesting thing happened that created this title, Breakfast at Whippany.
Okay.
Tongue in cheek, because we're located in Whippany. I happened to sit next to Linda Barth on a bus tour of Greater Morristown, because nothing more historic than Morristown. You know, this is where Alexander Hamilton met his wife, right? You do know that. Yes, that's true. And I am friendly with Lin Juan Miranda. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's another story. And Linda and I got talking, and she said to me riding the bus, because we both received grants from the New Jersey Historical Commission, as well as because we have synagogues in Morris County. We also get grants from the Morris County Heritage Commission. There are so many names and so many details in life in general. She said she was looking for a place to host the League of New Jersey Societies fall meeting 2018. Well, far be it from me to say no to something like that. You know, somebody gives you an offer, and that's, by the way, something that I kind of live my life by. I got some great advice from a gentleman whose name is Louis Bamberger, the owner of Bamberger Department Store, that great glamorous institution that was in Newark from 1892 to 1992. Bamberger always said, if you get a good offer, just take it. So she gave us the author, but one thing came into play. Suddenly, their meetings are held only on Saturdays. Needless to say, a Jewish Historical Society in a building is not going to be open on Saturday. So I asked Linda, could she ask her board, could they think out of the box? Right. And guess what? They did. And I thought, what can I name this event that's going to happen? And I thought about it, certainly, Breakfast at Whippany, hence the takeoff, Breakfast at Tiffany. Nice. It was a great day. And we were covered with glory. 42 representatives from different historical societies all showed up at our door for Breakfast at Tiffany. And it was just a wonderful experience, because it let us, like I'm speaking with you, let the world know that there is such a thing as a Jewish Historical Society and that we do great things. So a little self-propelling.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So today's Jewish news, which, by the way, is our major vehicle for getting out the history of this community. Since May of 2002, I can date it, we, as a historical society, have had either a photo and a caption or a feature article in its newspaper, unless they had no room. Now, that is a great track record. I don't care what anybody says, but from 2002, and it has served us well, because when people read about a thing, they start to think, well, maybe they too can lead by example. And that's how we get so many of the items that have been acquired that are now in our archive. So today's issue, before I even start to take us shopping through the archives and picking off the shelves, the front page of today's Jewish News features the very important, at this moment more so than ever because of his recent passing, Congressman John Lewis. It's funny how your memory just gets jogged by things that you don't expect it. We have a very small library that we keep in our archive, just with select books that usually have something to do about Newark or Greater Morris County, because those are our venues. But we had one of our founders, a Nancy Herman, may she rest in peace, who I was quite friendly with, who if were to define who she was in today's terms, you would call her a social activist. When she was active in politics in West Orange, social activism was not really a term that you would understand or identify as we would today, but she was. She came in one day with a series of books that she thought would be germane to what we do, because we don't normally take books. And in that mix comes this book, Walking with the Wind, which is the autobiography of Congressman Lewis. But here's the better part of it. Not only do we have it, and I'm thinking about the consequences of his life well lived, the idea of him causing trouble, but only good kinds of trouble, because you follow it. I'm a news junkie because I'm nosy. I like to know what's happened in the middle of the night. But look what I have here, and I think it is more than meaningful. It will be featured in next week's Jewish News. Let me find it. This is an autograph copy.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, to me, it's more than fantastic. Now, if my thumbs would work, I will just give me a second to put this down. And here it says, I'll just show it to you and then I'll read it. So you can see that it is autographed, and it says, to Nancy, her name is Nancy Herman, thank you for all of your help and great work. With faith and hope, keep your eyes on the prize. Best wishes, John Lewis, February 18th, 1999.
That's beautiful.
That's a beautiful thing. Talk about history being timely. You know, history is just not, and hopefully I always talk about history with reverence because it's my thing. I have 3 degrees, mostly about American studies, and to me it's meaningful. It is everything, you know, going forward. But this, of course, struck the right moment at the right time.
Absolutely.
So let me talk about the fact that we have a series of traveling exhibits that I would like to make mention of. I'm not going to name them all.
Okay.
But the very first one happened to be the Jews of Morris and Sussex, early settlers, synagogues, and hotel resorts. When I first got this job, I was then declared outreach director for Morris and Sussex, and the state was happy to fund such an opportunity. And so therefore, I got on the road. I drove maybe 10,000 miles over a period of a year and a half, going from synagogue to synagogue, private person interviews throughout Morris County. The net result was this.
Okay.
The net result, oh, here it is. Okay. Because I want to show you in specific. The first time this society had ever done anything quite like this, it is a source guide, which means whatever I found now resides in this archive, aptly named for past President Howard Kiesel. It tells you every document that I was able to beg, borrow, and steal from every synagogue, every private collection that I brought back, and it is here. It had never been done before, because this community, for the most part, its history and roots are in Newark. I mean, and it was a case of, for me, I say casually, you know, when Jews, as most of them were peddlers and came to the country, certainly in Morris County, I usually use the phrase, go west, as if go west, young man, like Horace Greeley said, Well, and that's what they did. And they set up synagogues and they businesses and they prospered. And four out of what I'm going to talk about all had synagogues that when I tackled them were at least 100 years old. That's meaningful. To me, it is meaningful. But because of all of this research, I mounted what I felt would be, in my mind, maybe a little job security, that never mind vacation sets for somebody else not looking to hold on to something.
Right.
I only had a 1-year contract, by the way. I've never seen it, but that's okay by me because I'm here 22 years later. It's no big deal, right? It worked out fine. But they were early settlers and they established synagogues, I mean, these Jews that came to Morris County, and they did build hotel resorts in a place called Mount Freedom. And Mount Freedom did have resort hotels that rivaled those of the Catskills. They were so popular because there was no Route 17 that took you from New Jersey. And there were no opportunities to take airplanes, which became more common as the years went on. But one of the sweetest stories was told to me by someone who witnessed an audition for a hotel by the name of Lieberman's. The person doing the auditioning was Pete Lieberman. And Lieberman listened to the guy sing. He looked at the guy, and the guy was a little short, a little skinny, and he sounded okay. And Lieberman said, "Hey, listen, kid," he said, "you better think about another career." He said, "I don't think you've got what it takes." And the person he told that to was Frank Sinatra. Now, this is all urban legend, that comes to me. But since I can't talk to Pete Lieberman, and I had no reason to believe that he was not that kind of flamboyant, in other words, he's looking for people to come to his hotel, and he wanted first-class entertainment. The same Borscht Belt candidates that were in the Catskills made their way to Mount Freedom. And not only Mount Freedom, but even to Lake Apatcon, because they had hotels there too. And that was a case of, it was not welcoming to Jews. There was a synagogue. Most of the people who came from New York. And the way you knew you were welcome at a hotel in Lake Apatcon is you would read the daily newspaper or whatever the publication was, and it would say dietary laws observed. That was the clue. Well, listen, this takes a long time to learn all this stuff.
No, absolutely. No, it's fascinating.
There's a case of, some people may remember Milton Berle. He was a staple at Lake Apatcon with all of the whatever and whatevers. And Lake Apatcon has a historical society, et cetera, and so forth. Now, for reasons that I'll get to a little later, I had an opportunity to do something because we got a collection, believe it or not, of letters from Albert Einstein's private secretary, Helen Dukas, and letters from Otto Nathan, who was Albert Einstein's executor. They all came to us through a rather prominent rabbi, the chief rabbi for many years at B'nai Jeshurun, located now in Short Hills, but at one time in Newark. Everything from Newark moved west. In other words, they came to Short Hills, to wherever they were. And I'm looking at them and I'm reading them, and I know Pilchik's daughter. And I got a hold of her, and she brought me in the most amazing letters that were written to her father, et cetera, and so forth. With all this information, I decided to do a very successful exhibit, and I called it, this is kind of funny, It's All Relative. Newark and Albert Einstein. Now, Einstein was documented on the front page of the Weequahic High School's Calumet, its newspaper of record, where he gave each student advice. He said, get yourself an education. You cannot be successful without one. It was a great article. Of course, I have the newspaper. And who would know but Albert Einstein, right? I thought he was reasonably smart. I dubbed him probably the smartest man in the world, because after he passed away, they did an autopsy on him, and the person doing it had taken his brain and sliced it into pieces and parceled it out to determine what made Einstein so brilliant. And you read about this in a book called Driving Mr. Einstein, which is quite clever. I have the book. If it relates to Einstein, and it's far more interesting than even Walter Isaacson's version of Einstein. But that's a story for another day. So the very first exhibit after the Jews of Morris and Sussex was something known as Who's Minding the Store? This was funded by Wakefern, which was then ShopRite, eventually became ShopRite, and King's, and no longer in business, but Pathmark. Most people do not realize that the major supermarkets in the state of New Jersey were founded by Jews and members of the Greater MetroWest community. And it was my pleasure to know the ShopRite owners. Certainly, I was close friends with Alan Bildner, who was King's. And of course, we had the premier advertising person of all time, Zal Vanetsky, or Zal Vanet, who proceeded to put on his license plate, Ad Man #1, because he did publicity for all of them. And some of this information, advertise, for which I do have a video, talks about the can promotion.
Mm-hmm.
That was started by Zal Vanet in the 50s, but it still goes on today. In other words, it's a great legacy. And whenever I walk into a ShopRite, I think about all of those who contributed. By the way, what made this exhibit unbelievably interesting was that I had become friendly with a gentleman named Jerry Rudy, who had in his basement, his hobby, he collected grocery store items from the 1930s. So when I set up the exhibit, everything from a Coca-Cola machine to a bread a cutter to you name it, and all of the items, because I won't show them to you now because it's not going to happen successfully. But we did, and anybody wants to see it, they can contact me. We'll talk about that later. But there is this grocery store filled with brand names that you would know now, sometimes in similar packaging, but it was authentic. It was the real deal. I won't get up to get the pictures, so we'll just let it pass, etc. But that's what happened. But here's the interesting part about it. Jerry Rudy, may he rest in peace, was contacted by the Smithsonian Institution. You've heard of it?
Yes, of course.
And if you go to the Smithsonian and you tackle the American wing, you will discover that Jerry Rudy's grocery store is there in full glory, because they picked all of the items that they felt really had a certain moment to it. It is not the first time that we have donated something of significance. For instance, World War I.
Yeah.
Did I get to that exhibit yet? No. I'm going to stop there for a minute.
Sure.
The next exhibit that came along was something known as Born at the Beth, or It Happened at the Beth.
Okay.
Beth Israel Hospital, Newark Beth Israel Hospital, was founded in 1901. We have the original minutes in our archive that were written by those doctors on staff who started the first and only Jewish hospital ever in the state of New Jersey, meaning Newark Beth Israel Hospital. And of course, we have all of their records because somebody gathered them all up. We have them, and we did an amazing exhibit called Born at the Beth. 400 people responded to the request in the Jewish news from all over the country. People left, and it said simply this: were you a relative or a friend born at Beth Israel Hospital? 400 people sent us their photographs to say that they were, when, and other additional information. But the three figures, that stick out to me, born at the Beth, are Jerry Lewis, don't tell me you never heard of him, meaning the comedian, you might have, as well as Philip Roth, don't tell me you never heard of him.
I've heard.
You might have heard of him. And who else is, who's my third? Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank, but it'll come to me eventually, because they're all in a mix, in a constant contact transmission or e-blast. Jerry Lewis. Hey, Jill. Jerry Lewis. Phil Urish. And who's the third person born at the Beth that we put in our mix? We'll think about it. We'll come back to it. I did say Philip Roth. Philip Roth, yes. And who? No, I don't want Phil Urish. If I did, I don't tell Phil. I said no. He came along too, but he was born in the Beth, though. We'll just leave it at that. It'll come to me. It's just whatever the case may be. But I will tell you, we held an opening reception. Our opening receptions are the best, to say the least. And of course, all our exhibits have a docent attached to them. And what made this unique is that I was able to get my dressmaker to make an exact replica of the nurse's uniform that nurses at the Beth wore when the hospital first opened up at the turn of the century. Identical, because I had the photograph.
Yeah.
And of course, I have other memorabilia. I have artifacts, memorabilia, photographs, you name it, I got it with everything that comes along. But what made it unique is that we had showcases with this particular exhibit, but I had someone fabricate a replica of a hospital bed as you would have seen it in the wards with the children, with plexiglass over it. It contained, for argument's sake, all the pacemakers used by the famous Dr. Victor Parsonet, who implanted the first pacemaker, which was as big as a bread box and got increasingly smaller. Or I had all of the dental instruments because the Beth had a dental clinic, and it still does. And to see them all under glass bed was just it. And that exhibit traveled to Newark because, why not? Because here we are. A book, a very famous book written about Newark Beth Israel Hospital called Covenant of Care. And we, of course, played a major part in such a thing. And we sold them, we exhibited them, but the beds caught everybody's imagination. Because who does something like that? It works for me, though. What do you think? So that is pretty much the idea born at the Beth. To this day, I have a logo, and I asked somebody to submit their baby photo. To this day, I know who it is, but nobody else does. I kept it under wraps, but he was a prominent figure, and I know he was pleased to see himself as the part of the logo. All of our exhibits have logos, and they are unique to themselves. So I'm going to move on to something known as One More Night at Elving's Metropolitan Yiddish Theater.
Okay.
Now, Newark was home to the only successful commercial Yiddish theater, and it was called Elving's Metropolitan. We have photographs, plus all of the research I did at YIVO in Manhattan to pull all this history together. I decided that we should have, as a society, one more night at Elving's Metropolitan Yiddish Theater. Don't move. And here's what we prepared.
Very nice.
One more night. And we charged for tickets. The price you would have paid if you were in the city of Newark at the time it was in its heyday of $8. And I thought, well, this is for Yiddish music. Who appeared on this stage? You name it. If they were in the Second Avenue Theater, which people associate New York Second Avenue Yiddish Theater, the same people played on Elving's stage. So it was Boris and Bessie Tomaszewski. They are the grandparents to Michael Tilson Thomas, the famous conductor. Who else was there? Menashe Skolnick. And it even was reported to me that the famous Hollywood star Paul Muni got married backstage at Elving's. All of this swirls around, and I'm saying to myself, what we need to hear is Yiddish music.
Sure.
I decided to contact the powers that be to permit us to open the exhibit, because it was an exhibit titled One More Night at Elving's, and it showed all of the stars that came the way and all of everything you'd possibly want to see, but it came with a community-wide song fest, a Yiddish song fest. And who was invited? All the youngsters from the Hebrew day schools, the various synagogues, the women's orchestra, chorus groups like Shiruna,
Mm-hmm.
and they all came. And I even had a few Holocaust survivors who sang songs in Yiddish. They were poignant, they were wonderful. It was like you could not think that such a thing could happen. And it was held in West Orange at the Levin Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And my board of trustees said, Linda, come on, give us a break. I said, listen to me, all of you, you better get your tickets now, because when you come, you will not get a seat. And that's exactly what happened. It was sold out, lock, stock, and barrel. And everybody heard Yiddish music, but the kids were the best.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it. You can see it on our website. By the way, if someone's listening, I'll just repeat our website, because there you can find a great thing. It is not complicated. Lowercase JHS hyphen dot JHS hyphen NJ.org. Let's do that one again. How many times can I think about it? But it's lowercase JHS hyphen NJ.org. When you click on it or you Google it, I promise you, even if you did not grow up in this community, good history is good history, I always maintain. And I have discovered after 22 years that all Jews are connected. And every time I start a project like this, people come from miles around because they're reading about it in the Jewish news. We are masters of outreach. If we do it, what good if nobody knows about it?
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
therefore, it's logical, isn't it? Logic's not my strong point, but promotion is. I learned that from Louis Bamberger. Promote, promote, promote. So let me think about this before. Well, I want to mention the fact that when we commemorated the end of World War I, 11/11/11, we did an exhibit called The Road to Victory. What made it special is that who came to speak at that program
Yeah.
was a gentleman by the name of Lester Jensen, who's the curator of the West Point Museum. This to me was a big deal. I mean, who's doing this? But the government gave him permission to come, and the government did not charge us anything. Amazing.
Mm.
Amazing in and of itself. So, but we called it The Road to Victory. Now, what I really want to stress is the exhibit of all exhibits, and it was called Weequahic Memoirs, celebrating Newark's legendary Jewish neighborhood. In 2008, we opened an exhibit that still reverberates. It has been everywhere. It has been quoted and requoted. It is the mascot of the existing Weequahic High School Alumni Association, because there you saw the history of what was then probably the most famous high school in the entire country. The story was told that when the principal of the high school during summer vacation of Ben Epstein traveled cross country because he'd like to research colleges in the Midwest, etc., for his students who had different interests, he stopped off at several on his way. And every time he introduced himself, one of the guidance counselors or whoever it is in the admission office, she said, Weequahic. She said, is your high school the one with the funny name? Because Weequahic was only pronounced correctly by its principal, Dr. Hertzberg. Some people called it Weequahic. Some called it Weequahic, like cheesecake, but the right way was Weequahic. And it is probably the most famous neighborhood in the entire country, certainly on the eastern seaboard in America. Why so? Because it is the Weequahic neighborhood that Philip Roth made famous. And don't tell me you don't know who Philip Roth is.
I do, but I would ask you to talk a little bit about it. So for anyone who's watching this who may not be familiar.
Okay, so therefore, let's talk about it. Philip Roth wrote 31 books. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1987 for American Pastoral, made into a movie. It has gained more notoriety in the last couple of, well, not even this past year, because of the premise that he supposed, wouldn't it be interesting if Charles Lindbergh were elected president of the United States and the ensuing problems, because Lindbergh was an avowed supported Hitler. And as a result, just this one book, because other things have been made, his works, Goodbye Columbus was made into a movie. I mean, others, but specifically The Plot Against America became an HBO special. You could have found it on HBO more recently. And if you knew how to negotiate, it wouldn't have cost you anything. You wouldn't have had to subscribe. But the point being is the power here of what we have in our archives is so significant that when HBO decided to reach out, the person who was doing all of that research to kind of replicate the neighborhood that The Plot of America would have been filmed in came here to do her research.
Oh, wow.
We were the yardstick. Yes, we are the gold standard when it comes to things that you would not, which we know about, and now maybe somebody else will know also. If you want to know about Jewish history, particularly Newark's Jewish history, I might even mention something like this. The only book written about Newark's Jews, The Enduring Community, by the author Bill Helmreich. Well, I knew Bill Helmreich. I had had dinner with him. I helped him with information along the way because I knew what would be in the archives. But here's when the COVID became personal. I was watching CNN several months ago, and I looked at the ticker tape coincidentally, and across my screen in my home comes the name William Helmreich. I did a double take. And of course, the New York Times wrote a huge obit on him. Certainly, the New Jersey Jewish News did, but his unique contribution was to write about Newark's Jews. No one had ever done it before, and not since, to the extent that it mentions so many of the important facets of what Newark was all about as a city where Jews came, they settled, they grew prosperous businesses. It's a story that's replicated. It's every Jew's story, actually. But of course, it's here. And we have, of course, his manuscript and everything that goes with it. So I think it's kind of quite special. So where am I going to go from here? This idea of going back to Weequahic and this exhibit. So 489 seats are filled, and they have come to hear then Mayor Cory Booker, now Senator Cory Booker. And he did such a great job because he knows our community. I have had the pleasure of making sure that Cory had some of the books that came from this Weequahic experience. And I will tell you, one of the hottest sellers that ever came across the boards was this book. Here it is, Jews of Weequahic. It was a byproduct of the exhibit. This exhibit had a great map of Weequahic, and people sent in very nice contributions just to have their names put on the map in terms of what streets they lived in or on when they were living in the Weequahic neighborhood. Those who grew up in Weequahic still get together. It's a phenomenon that is really very special. Their memories are so significant. But this was so successful, it required 2 printings. That rarely happens. And it's still selling. In other words, it's a subject. In fact, the woman on the right that you see, the majorette there,
Yep.
her name is Doris Beck. If you check the Star Ledger of a few days ago, you would see her obit, and mentioned in it was the fact that she appeared on the cover of this book, Jews of Weequahic. And somebody said to me, because they couldn't make out which one she was, maybe they didn't buy the book, that's terrible. And I explained who she was, because she was at one time the mayor of Livingston. Quite special. So all of this swirls around us, but Weequahic that's the heart and soul of Jews from Newark. They've moved all over the country. You can find them in California and Arizona, up and down the eastern seaboard. There was actually some thought to taking the exhibit called Weequahic Memoirs to Florida. And guess what was the only thing that prevented us? It was called En Lanu Kesef. In Hebrew means we didn't have any money.
So
I think that's how pretty much it went. Now I'm trying to think about so I don't miss anything until I mention something that is also important.
okay.
Our past president, Warren Grover,
Mm-hmm.
wrote the Bible book for Nazis in Newark, the Minutemen, and those individuals who were Jewish boxers who came under the supervision, is a nice word, of the New Jersey's gangster and bootlegger Longy Swillman. And they told the story, have Newark's Jews with Longy Swillman at the helm. He may have done other things that we don't want to think about. No sense in slandering him at this moment. He's long gone. Wanted to defeat the Bund in terms of the rallies that they kept holding in Newark and in nearby Irvington. And this book documents that story. And it is quite a work.
Yeah.
The research that goes into something. But this is going to lead me to, let me think. I wanted to show you this too. You don't mind my backwards forwards. Because of the work that I did in Morris and Sussex, here's the Jews of Morris County. So, you know, everything has some origin, but you know, when you do it, it's kind of, it's a neat package altogether. You know, you do the research, you gather the information, you put it in the archives, you create a database, you let people know what's there, from the source guide to the pictures, et cetera, and so forth. So you get a sense of who did what in terms of settling in Morris County. And mostly they were peddlers that came, they went around the countryside, they set up shops on what was known as Speedwell Avenue, or the resort hotels, or anything of that nature, but they were Morris County people and did a good job of it. They created great Jewish lives, which is what we're all about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And of course, every once in a while, you get someone who gives you probably the last of its kind in existence. It's called Looking Back to the Sunrise. It was written by somebody who lived the life of Jews who settled in Pine Brook. I don't think another one exists. But when someone discovered that I was doing all of this work for the Jews of Morris and Sussex, well, Sussex is another story, but Morris County, they sent me this, which I thought was more than generous, more than generous. And it tells the story like nobody else can, because it's called Eyewitness. It's just not secondhand, and everything about it is charming and delightful, really. And they had hotel resorts in Pine Brook also. So we did this. So now we have to get to the piece de resistance.
Please.
I'm very new in the society, and I'm attending a board meeting and listening to everything that's going on. When someone whose name is Ozzy Lax, may he rest in peace, at the end of the meeting said, you know what? What this society needs is someone to write the history, the story, whatever it is you wanted to call it, the biography of one gentleman whose name was Louis Bamberger. And I listened to what he had to say. And when I left the meeting, I went into our archives to take a look through the boxes to see where Louis would pop up and what role he played in shaping this greater MetroWest community. There was very little to be found. I found certain things. And of course, for your listeners to know, Bamberger's department store, as incredible as it seemed to me, but documented, when he eventually sold it in 1929, which is putting this story a little too fast, had grown the 4th largest department store in America in a very small size city. Newark never exceeded, based on population studies, 485,000 people living within its 24-mile radius. How did he do such a thing? The only 3 stores that came before him were Filene's, whom he knew the founder, Macy's, because they were German Jews who stuck together, who he eventually sold his store to, and Hudson's in Detroit. And then there's Newark. What did Louis Bamberger know that the rest of the department store community didn't know? He knew how to promote. He started small, and I, of course, can document all of the above. And from there, he grew his store to a larger facility in 1916. And by the time he sold it in 1929, like I said, it was the 4th largest department store in America. He did it on unparalleled, incredible, what somebody would call, and I joke about it from time to time, customer service and promote. For Bamberger, the slogan was promote, 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 and give good customer service. He sold his store in 1929 because his partner Felix Wald had passed. His relationship with John Cotton Dana, who was at the head of the Newark Public Library, his whole team had passed, and here he was now 74, not feeling quite well, and he decided to sell. Now, you read about mergers and acquisitions. It took Bamberger exactly 10 days to negotiate the sale of his department store. And the stock firm, because the German Jews stayed with and among themselves, was Lehman Brothers. Let's not talk about Lehman Brothers and what they set off in future years, because that's another story for another day. He sold it, and they read about it in the newspaper, but they never took the name Bamberger off the building because he was associated with unparalleled, superb customer service. And no matter where that name went, even to the branch stores, which he never saw and never was quite interested in, his name held supreme. I think one of the greatest stories is this idea of keeping your customer happy. You could buy anything that you wanted at Bamberger's from the get-go, including you could buy a bird, a parrot, and you could buy bird seed. And if you wanted and you ran out of bird seed, you called the store and they would deliver it to you. One box, a single spool of thread, whatever you wanted, they delivered it free of charge. Nothing is free, but then it was. And one day the operator sitting at one of the, one ringy dingy, 2 ringy dingies, the customer said, could Bamberger's delivery department come pick up the bird seed that I bought? She said, I can't use it. And the woman at the other end of the line said, well, why not? And the woman answering the question was as simply this. She said, the bird died. There was not any place that Bamberger wouldn't go. Now, I have researched this. Somebody would say, and it's true, why, allowing for who Bamberger was? I mean, he shaped the city of Newark for the first half of the 20th century. At this moment, one of the more popular exhibits that is on the 3rd floor of the New Jersey Historical Society in downtown Newark happens to be something known as Meet Me Under the Bamberger Clock. Bamberger's clock was more famous than any other meeting place in the city of Newark. People sent me emails to tell me that they met their business partners or family members. And one woman wrote me, she said, my God, she said, I got engaged under the Bamberger clock. I will never forget it. You could buy a pretzel there on an outdoor stand. I mean, they had, every kind of service imaginable, because that's what he was known for. And I gathered all of his news bulletins and everything else, and he put out a schematic or a brochure that if you walked into the store, he would tell you in writing what's on floor 1, what's on floor 2, floor 3, all the way up. But I will tell you the most significant floor in that department store was the 11th floor. Why? Not for the goods that were sold on, but that's where Bamberger's office was located. Nothing happened in this greater Jewish community that I am sitting in now and reporting on happened that it didn't run past Louis's muster. You met in Bamberger's office on the 11th floor, and it is there he determined whether he thought the cause was worthwhile for him to support. And everybody, in fact, when all of the commotion was going on during this Nazi Bund expedition on part of the Minutemen, it turned out that much of the issue had to do with goods being imported from Germany. And the whole city was up in arms. No goods from Germany can be allowed. No, 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 no. But Bamberger was part of a committee of 100 that were opposed to this. And of course, it's his department store. Macy's now owns it. But here's what happened throughout the community. The only exception to those German-made goods and not making a big deal out of it came simply like this. No one is to even mention, criticize, or say anything that would be negative about Louis Bamberger. We do not bite the hand that feeds us. So, exceptions are made for everything. So I'm just thinking about it, it comes to my mind that this is what's going on. But Bamberger was Newark for the first half of the 20th century. In fact, there is somebody who actually entertained the idea or question, why was there no biography written about Louis Bamberger? Think about what he did, what he represented. There would be no why. There would be no Newark Museum because he gave it to the city lock, stock, and barrel, including the collections. He gave Newark Museum to the city. And where was Albert Einstein going to get a job as head mathematician had Louis Bamberger not endowed the Institute for Advanced Study, which is the world's most famous research facility anywhere in the world. But it was Bamberger's money. He could see the point of it. Although when he sold his store, he cleared about $40 million just before the stock market fell. Everybody seemed to think, well, what kind of luck did Bamberger have? And to that, Bamberger would say, he said, I have learned that it is not luck. He said, you make your own luck, he said, and I made my luck. And by the way, when you get into your car and you turn on your radio, you spin the dial and you're looking for WOR, you know what call letters it has? Is it 710 for WOR?
I think so. I'm not 100%, but I think that's right.
Yeah, well, that's the radio station founded by Bamberger. In 1922. It was the first radio ever broadcast from a department store and then some. And he got the call letters. He wanted WLB like for Louis Bamberger, but they had already been taken. So he settled for WOR. And they went back and forth. Would he pay for it? What advantage would it be? And of course, all the history tells you that advertising is good, but not initially, that's not what happened. Bamberger just liked classical music, and that's what played on his station. But it is 100 plus years later. It is still WOR on the same dial, 710, and its roots and everything that it represents are because Bamberger said yes. So why wasn't a biography written about this genius among the other things that he did? Funding Hebrew Orphans Asylum or Home or Child Guidance, you name it. They came to Louis with all kinds of ideas, and he said yes if they made sense to him. Nobody wrote about him because when Louis Bamberger died on March 11th in 1944, of course, it was blazoned all over the newspapers because of what his company was. He didn't want any ceremonies. In fact, he got cremated. He was not going to deal with anything but that was, and I can tell you where he was cremated and who picked up the ashes and where they now are, have been scattered, but you'll have to save it for the book. In any event, I was of the opinion nobody wrote about Louis to the extent that you will see in this book, which is called Louis Bamberger, Department Store Innovator and Philanthropist, because when Bamberger died, he left this world having left no private diaries, and he left no business records. And so piecing it together was maybe more than any historian wanted to do. But in truth, from the day I started it, I spent 8 years researching Bamberger, going through newspapers. I went as far as Oakland, California, to interview the last relative that would have remembered Bamberger when he was living in South Orange. So that's called research. And I spoke about Bamberger before this book because I knew enough about him. I spoke in Chicago at a gathering of historians because I compared him or his relationship with the famous Julius Rosenwald, the owner of Sears. They were friends. All department store owners knew one another. I spoke about him in Portland, Oregon. I spoke about him in Boston at the Boston Public Library. I spoke about him in Charleston, all based on the initial research that I did. But the real meat and potatoes came on weekends and vacations. It took that, and I believe that was why nobody wanted to tackle it. So here's what happened. I got myself an editor, much like Philip Roth had. He did have editors, even the great Philip Roth. And she was really quite good. And we got to the point where I really had a pretty good manuscript all fleshed out and ready to go, chapter by chapter. And I said to the assistant or the editor, whatever you want to call her, I said, I think we need to put together a book proposal. I said, and since I can't think of anybody with the letter A to send it to for publication, how about we start with B and we do Brandeis? She said to me, Linda, she said, Brandeis is not going to be interested. In their opinion, Bamberger was not Jewish enough. Not Jewish enough. And it was true. Bamberger was not big on formal religion. What he did believe in, and both he and Einstein were members, was the Ethical Culture Society. This he could understand because he believed in those principles. And that's how he led his life, by those principles. Well, I said, Stephanie, because this is what she's thinking, it's not what I'm thinking. I said to her, Stephanie, you know what? It's only a 49-cent stamp. Then it was 49-cent stamp. And so we sent in 2 sample chapters, and who reads it but I consider the preeminent American Jewish or Jewish American historian, no other than Jonathan Sarna. Is that a name that rings a bell with you? Yes, Sarna is Lincoln and the Jews, that incredible exhibit that appeared at the New York Historical Society, and then some. Well, the editor gave Sarna 2 chapters, and he looked at her. He said, "You mind if I read these?" He did. He came back, and he said, "There's no biography about Bamberger amongst all the important things that we have published," meaning Brandeis University Press. It was a no. He said, "Well, it's going to end." He said, "I want this book published." And so much for the lesson that you learn. When things make sense and somebody tells you no, it's because they think no for themselves, but I didn't think so. I thought it had sufficient momentum, and that's how the book got published. It came out in 2016, and I have spoken about Bamberger. Even my friends don't even want to hear me start a word with the letter B, like I'm going to talk about Bamberger, but he was my hero. He was, because you could travel the city of Newark. You can go anywhere that you want. You would never see his name on anything so much as even a light bulb. He flew low under the radar. Everybody knew him. When he appeared at an event, everything stopped. I mean, as if to say, Louis is here. He even outdid, at that time, Woodrow Wilson, when Wilson came to town to talk about some milestone event for the Hebrew Orphans Asylum. He was there. But I want to show you what the upshot of it was. And I guess this is probably a little self-serving, but to me, it's meaningful. So let me show you this.
Okay.
This book got such a round of applause by what we know as the Newark Preservation and Landmarks Committee. You can see this. This was what was sent out. I don't know if you can make it out. I think maybe you can.
Newark Preservation Landmarks Committee.
That's right. Well, the decision was made that I, as a result of the Bamberger research and the Bamberger book, plus the efforts I put forth to save Weequahics history, because they spoke about shutting the high school down, that's another story, that I would be the recipient of what is considered the most prestigious award that the city of Newark could present to any historian, and that's the Charles Cummings Award. And so it was awarded to me in 2017. Now, this you won't believe, because the Bamberger book, by the way, and I should mention this, was reviewed. And who reviewed it but Philip Roth? Roth and I have 20 years correspondence. He was a member of the Historical Society. He wasn't a big supporter, but he sent his $100 check in like faithful, and he never signed it because then it would really be valuable. Here's what happened after the notice came out that I had won. Well, I was awarded, I was the recipient of the Charles Cummings, because Cummings was probably Newark's finest historian of all time. In fact, he gave Roth an incredible amount of attention and research. He would research for him, et cetera, and so forth. And 2 days after it was known that I was the recipient, I opened the door and I see right on a pile of mail at my front door is this small white envelope, and it's marked wherever. I open it up, and on heavy cardstock with Philip Roth's name on the top, he congratulated me. He said, "I want to congratulate you on your winning the Charles Cummings Award and a few other things." And I'm thinking to myself, is this really true? Do I pinch myself? And somebody said, "Well, what did you do with it? You know, it's valuable. I mean, it's his handwriting. I knew him as Philip. It was a nice relationship. He usually told me no every time I asked him to come and speak, but that's okay. A lot of people tell me no." Somebody said to me, "Well, what did you do with it?" I said it took me exactly 3 hours to go to the framers about a mile from me, have it framed, and it's now hanging on the wall in my house. I said, I consider it quite special.
Yeah.
After this happened, when Brandeis and University Press of New England, which no longer exists, saw that Roth had autographed the book, I got acres of requests from Dartmouth, Northeastern, and the University of New Hampshire, as well as Brandeis. Could I get Philip Roth to endorse or review other books that have come their way? I said to myself, holy crow. So I wrote a letter to Philip. I said, you know, let's face it. I said, you're quite famous. I said, and I will not authorize anything that you do not approve. I said, I will not let them use your name or me use it in vain. I say, but here's what I've been asked. Do you know what he wrote back? And I have that letter also. He said, Linda, it'd be my pleasure. Use it any way that you see fit.
Oh.
Now, many people have billed him to be somewhat curmudgeonly, some type of maybe a little disagreeable, but you can only judge people by the way they treat you.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like a great thing. But I've met many wonderful people. This is a job that takes me places that I would never think to be, including working with two of the nicest women. You know, you would think that all of these exhibits, all these forums, all this everything come from a huge cadre of individuals, you know, all marching in lockstep. It isn't that way. I have my role. We have a remarkable archivist who really knows her stuff. Her name is Jill Hirshhorn. And we even have an administrator who tells me I spend too much money. And she's mostly half, and her name is Irene Siegel. But the three of us together, as far as I'm concerned, are the Three Musketeers. And everything that I have told you, and it's not even a spit in the ocean, is the result of three people who are really dedicated to telling a story and putting our best foot forward. So when people think about the Jewish Historical Society of New Jersey, they know what Clemens said. If they cannot give you what you want, they know where to find it. And that to me is high praise. You know, that's called the vote of confidence. So I think I bent your ear. I could tell you many more stories. It would exhaust you. I thought maybe, could I write this down? I lay awake. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? If I were to say everything I would have already said, I would have written the great American novel, but I was not prepared to do that. And I think your listeners get the sense of, if they're looking for great history and it's local or even state history, you can find it here. And if you are really looking and you are a researcher, you will appreciate the fact that you can access the Jewish news either on microfilm for something known as the Jewish Chronicle, which is the first of its paper of record for Newark's Jews, and then moving into the 40s, what is then known as the Jewish News. Now it's morphed into all different kinds of names, just like Federation is all different. But I will say one thing, Bamberger will reign supreme in 2023. How so? Louis Bamberger is the father of the Federation.
Mm.
This great MetroWest community is going to celebrate 100 years.
Oh, lovely. That's
And
wonderful.
we will revisit all of what the community has put in our archives that everybody will enjoy. But most of it is, if the truth be told, if you really sifted through all of us, most of us who walk into this building are here because of Louis Bamberger. He's he who would have paid our salaries. And so that is the saga. And anybody who wants to see the exhibit or anything about Louis Bamberger, you just make your way to the the New Jersey Historical Society, once again, Park Place, and you will see it. Now, I left one other element out, and I would be remiss. We honor America's veterans.
Mm.
Every Veterans Day, which is now November 11th, it used to be something different, whatever you want to call it. We honor our veterans.
Oh my God.
And sitting right adjacent to the Bamberger exhibit is an exhibit based on this book written by a gentleman whose name is Robert Max, who fought at the Battle of the Bulge, was captured by the Germans, put into German slave labor, and survived it. It is his story, and he and I are friends for decades. In fact, he's a past president of the Historical Society. It is an amazing read. And in fact, I'm headed to visit him this afternoon because I want to make sure I get all of my T's and I's and whatever else. And as well as 3 other veterans, one who served in the Pacific under Douglas MacArthur, Ray Schwarz, somebody from Morristown, Sid Levitt, and somebody by the name of Lester Bornstein, who was the father of the Beth. He ran Beth Israel Hospital after he got out of the Army. Those 3 have in common the Battle of the Bulge. But we commemorate Veterans Day, and I should have probably put this forward, but I didn't look to the right fast enough. But if you want to know about great history, it's right here. So, any questions? Dare you?
No. I was going to say you've done such a job in not only eloquently explaining the different programs you have going on, which I'm sure, as you mentioned, if someone looked on your website, there's many more other programs that you're working on, but your passion, knowledge, information on the main exhibits, on your own personal accomplishments and work that connects so beautifully with the Historical Society. There's really not, there are tons of questions I could ask, but I feel like you encapsulated the point of this so well that it almost.
And by the way, I have to interrupt you before I forget it. We have 4 exhibits sitting on the back burner just because of the time.
Right.
One of them happens to be called Spotlight on Elizabeth Bloom, Newark's Lady Lawyer, 1892 to 1991. She was the first female attorney in the state of New Jersey, and that's a story in and of itself. One on Allen Ginsberg, LGBTQ. We have acquired his personal letters that he sent to his family. That's 2. What's the 3 and 4? LGBTQ. And 2 more that will come to me, but I guess not something that we have to mull over, but will happen.
So what I'll do is I'll take a lot of the information. Obviously, I'll put the link of the website and to the interview, which if you can just remind everyone who's watching once again what the best way is to connect with you or learn more about your programs. What is the best way for people?
Yes, to go on our website, I will repeat, JHS lowercase hyphen NJ.org, or you can call me directly. I get home. I don't subscribe to I only work between 9 to 5 hours because when somebody has what you want, you don't set up the parameters. I mean, you'll miss out. That would not make sense to me. To me, this is a full-time job before the COVID, after the COVID, during the COVID. So you can call me at 973-993-8182, or you can email me at Forgosh, like for gosh sakes, at J for Jack, F for Frank, E for Edward, D for David, G for George, M for Mary, W for William.org. If you can remember all that, you're really good. But lowercase L Forgosh at JFedGMW. That's because I'm connected to the Federation Network, and we love what we do. And I'll tell you something, sorry you all could not have joined us the night that we introduced our exhibit called The Road to Victory, which had to do with World War I, because we hired a jazz combo or trio, and we danced to popular songs that you would have heard during World War I. It was an amazing evening. You know what? You just need a little imagination. And any number of people have told me no over these 22 years. I don't mind it. I figure if you can go over it, under it, around it, but if it makes sense, no is not an answer. No is maybe consider it, but think it through and full steam ahead.
I think this is a perfect moment for me to tell everyone that I hope everyone is well. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy. Linda, just the wealth of knowledge, the information. I hope people will go onto the website. I hope people will contact you. These sound like amazing exhibits. And of course, I wish you and everyone at the Society all the best. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
Yep.